The gunshot shattered the morning silence, and Martha Sullivan's scream died in her throat as rough hands clamped over her mouth and yanked her backward off the wagon seat. Everything happened so fast. One moment she had been guiding the supply wagon along the narrow trail that cut through the rocky foothills outside Julesburg, Colorado. Next, she was being hauled into the brush by men whose faces were painted for war. Her father's body slumped forward over the reins, blood spreading across his shirt. The horses bolted, taking the wagon careening down the trail, while Martha fought against the iron grip that held her. She bit down hard on the hand covering her mouth and tasted blood. The man cursed and struck her across the face, making stars explode in her vision. Then she was being thrown over a horse, her stomach slamming against the animal's back, hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard shouting in a language she did not understand, felt the horse lurch into motion beneath her, and then the world became a blur of pain and terror as they rode hard into the mountains. It was June of 1868, and Martha Sullivan had just turned 21 years old 3 weeks prior. She had never imagined her life would end like this. Nathan Ashford stood at the edge of the settlement, his weathered hands checking the supplies in his pack one final time. He was a mountain of a man, standing well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad as an axe handle and arms thick with muscle from years of trapping, hunting, and surviving in the wilderness. His dark hair hung past his collar, shot through with a few streaks of premature gray, despite him being only 28. His face was all hard angles and sun-weathered skin, with eyes the color of storm clouds that had seen more than most men twice his age. He had come into Julesburg to trade pelts and restock his supplies when word reached town about the attack. A supply wagon had been found overturned 5 miles out, one man dead, his daughter missing. The locals were too frightened to go after her. The raiding party had headed deep into Ute territory, and most folks figured the girl was already dead or wished she was. But something in Nathan would not let him walk away. Maybe it was the way the dead man's friend had described Martha, how she had insisted on making the supply run even though her father had wanted her to stay in town where it was safer. How she had a stubborn streak and a kind heart, always helping the sick and injured even when it put her at risk. Or maybe it was just that Nathan had spent too many years alone in the mountains and had forgotten what it was like to not help someone in desperate need. Either way, he found himself taking on the job of tracking her. The town council offered money, but Nathan refused it. He would go because it was the right thing to do, not for payment. The trail was already a day old by the time he set out, but Nathan was the best tracker in 3 territories. He could read signs in the wilderness that other men would not even notice. Within an hour of leaving Julesburg, he had found the spot where the attack happened, studied the tracks, counted at least 6 horses heading northwest into the high country. 6 men against 1, and they had a full day's head start. The odds were not good, but Nathan had faced worse. He pushed hard that first day, covering ground most men would need 2 days to cross. The trail led higher into the mountains, through pine forests thick with undergrowth, and across streams swollen with snowmelt. The raiders were moving fast, but not trying to hide their tracks. They felt confident this deep in their own territory. As the sun began to set, Nathan made a cold camp in a stand of aspens. He could not risk a fire giving away his position. He chewed on strips of dried venison and studied the darkening sky, thinking about the woman he was tracking. Martha Sullivan. He tried to imagine what she must be going through, the fear she must be feeling. He had to find her before it was too late. On the second day, the terrain grew more rugged. Nathan climbed steep slopes covered in loose scree that shifted treacherously under his boots. His muscles burned with the effort, but he did not slow down. The tracks showed the raiders were maintaining their pace, which told him Martha was still alive. Dead weight would have slowed them down. That evening, he found their first camp, the ashes of their fire still warm. He was gaining on them, maybe half a day behind now. He examined the ground carefully, found where they had kept Martha bound near a tree. There were signs of struggle, which made something hard and angry coil in his chest. She was fighting them. Good. That meant she still had spirit. By the 3rd day, Nathan's supplies were running low, but he barely noticed. He was locked onto the trail now, his entire focus narrowed to following those tracks. The mountains rose higher around him, jagged peaks still capped with snow even in June. The air grew thinner, making each breath require more effort. He crossed paths with a grizzly that afternoon, the massive bear rising on its hind legs when it caught his scent. Nathan stood perfectly still, his rifle ready but not raised. After a long moment, the bear dropped back to all fours and lumbered away into the trees. Nathan did not even pause to feel relief. He just kept moving. Martha's world had become a nightmare of pain and exhaustion. Her captors had not killed her, but they had not been gentle either. She was bound hand and foot each night, thrown over the back of a horse each day. Her body was a mass of bruises, her wrists rubbed raw from the rough ropes. She had stopped crying after the first day. Tears would not save her, and she refused to give these men the satisfaction of seeing her break. She did not understand why they had taken her. They spoke to each other in their own language, occasionally glancing at her but not addressing her directly. At night they posted guards, and during the day they pushed deeper into the mountains. Martha tried to remember the route, tried to mark landmarks in her mind, but everything began to blur together. On the fourth night, one of the men approached her with what looked like more sympathy than the others had shown. He was younger, perhaps close to her own age, with intelligent eyes. He offered her water and some dried meat, untying her hands so she could eat. Martha's instinct was to refuse, but she forced herself to accept. She needed her strength if she was going to survive this. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. The young man nodded but said nothing. When she finished eating, he retied her hands, but this time he left the bonds slightly looser. It was a small mercy, but Martha clung to it. Nathan was 4 days into the chase when the weather turned. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, and by noon, a cold rain was falling steadily. The drops made tracking harder, threatening to wash away the signs he was following. He moved faster, pushing himself despite the treacherous footing on rain-slicked rocks. That night, huddled under an overhang with water sheeting down all around him, Nathan allowed himself a few hours of rest. His body ached in ways it had not in years. He was not as young as he used to be, though he was still stronger than most men. But this pace was brutal even for him. He thought about turning back. No one would blame him. He had already come farther than anyone else would have dared. But then he thought about Martha, about how she must be suffering, about how she was depending on someone, anyone, to come for her even if she did not know it. And he knew he could not quit. When dawn broke gray and wet, Nathan was already moving again. By the 6th day, the trail led into a maze of canyons and narrow defiles. Nathan had to slow down, checking each turn carefully. This was perfect ambush country, and he could not afford to be careless. The rain had finally stopped, but everything was mud and standing water. He found signs that the raiders had split up briefly, then rejoined. They were getting nervous, checking their back trail. They knew someone was following them. That made them more dangerous, but it also meant they might make mistakes. On the 7th day, Nathan's supplies ran out completely. He was surviving on what he could forage and the occasional rabbit he managed to snare. Hunger gnawed at his belly, but he had been hungry before. He could endure. The tracks led him higher still, up into regions where the trees grew sparse and twisted by constant wind. The air was so thin now that even his powerful lungs labored with each breath. His legs burned with the constant climbing, but he did not slow down. Martha had lost count of the days. Time had become meaningless, just an endless cycle of pain and fear. But something had changed. The men seemed agitated, constantly looking behind them. She allowed herself a tiny spark of hope. Was someone following? Had someone come after her? She tried not to let that hope grow too large. Hope could be more painful than despair when it was crushed. But still she found herself watching the trail behind them, searching for any sign of a pursuer. On what she thought might be the 8th or 9th day, they reached a village. It was small, just a handful of lodges in a high mountain valley. The people there regarded Martha with a mixture of curiosity and hostility. The men who had captured her spoke with the village elders in their language, gesturing at her repeatedly. Martha was brought to a lodge and left there under guard. It was the first time in days she had been out of the rain and wind, and despite her fear, her exhausted body began to relax. A woman brought her food and water, even a blanket. Martha ate slowly, trying to make sense of her situation. That night, through the walls of the lodge, she heard raised voices, an argument of some kind. She could not understand the words, but the tone was clear enough. Some wanted one thing, others disagreed. Her fate hung in the balance of that argument. Nathan was 9 days into his pursuit when he realized the raiders had reached their destination. The tracks led to a hidden valley, and from a ridge overlooking it, he could see the small village below. Smoke rose from several lodges, and he counted perhaps 20 adults, plus children. He settled in to watch and wait. Rushing in would get both him and Martha killed. He needed to understand the layout, the routines, where they were keeping her. The sun crawled across the sky as he observed, his sharp eyes missing nothing. As evening fell, he spotted her. A woman with light hair being led from one lodge to another, surrounded by guards. Even from this distance he could see she was moving stiffly, hurt but alive. Relief flooded through him, so intense it almost made him dizzy. She was alive. After 9 days of tracking, of pushing himself to the very limits of his endurance, Martha Sullivan was alive. Now he just had to figure out how to get her out. Nathan spent 2 more days watching the village, learning its patterns. The guards changed at regular intervals. There was a path to the river where the women went to fetch water each morning. The horses were kept in a makeshift corral on the eastern edge of the village. He used those days to rest as well, to let his body recover some of its strength. He set snares and caught several rabbits, ate his fill for the first time in days. He found a spring and drank deeply, refilled his water skin. He cleaned his rifle and pistol, checked his ammunition. When the time came to move, he would need to be at his best. On the 11th night of his journey, Nathan made his move. Martha lay on the pile of furs that served as her bed, staring up at the smoke hole in the roof of the lodge. Tomorrow, she had gathered from gestures and the few words of English one of the women spoke. She would be moved again, traded to another band further north. The thought made her stomach clench with fear. She'd been trying to stay strong, to keep believing she might survive this. But that hope was fading. Even if someone had followed her trail, even if they had made it this far into hostile territory, how could one person possibly rescue her from an entire village? A sound outside the lodge made her tense. The guard posted at the entrance spoke sharply to someone. A reply came, calm and low, then a thud and silence. Martha's heart began to race. She sat up slowly, her eyes fixed on the entrance. The hide covering moved aside, and a massive figure ducked through into the dim interior. For a moment, Martha could not breathe. The man was huge, broader and taller than anyone she had ever seen. His hair hung damp around his face, and his eyes gleamed in the faint light from the dying fire. He held a knife in one hand, and for a terrifying second, she thought he had come to kill her. Then he pressed a finger to his lips in a gesture for silence and moved toward her with surprising grace for someone so large. He knelt beside her and began cutting through her bonds with quick, efficient movements. "Can you walk?" His voice was a low rumble, barely above a whisper. Martha nodded, not trusting her voice. Her hands and feet tingled painfully as circulation returned to them. "Stay close to me. Do exactly what I say when I say it. Understand?" She nodded again. He helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. Her legs felt weak, unreliable, but she forced herself to stand straight. "Good," he said. "Now let us go." He led her to the entrance, checked outside, then pulled her through. The guard lay crumpled on the ground, unconscious but breathing. The night was dark, the moon hidden behind clouds. Nathan kept one hand on Martha's arm, guiding her through the shadows between the lodges. They made it halfway to the edge of the village before a dog began barking. Then another. Nathan cursed under his breath and started moving faster, half carrying Martha when she stumbled. Shouts rose behind them. They had been discovered. "Run," Nathan said, and they ran. Martha's battered body protested every step, but fear gave her strength she did not know she had. Nathan pulled her along, his grip on her arm the only thing keeping her upright. Behind them, the village erupted into chaos. Torches flared to life, more shouts, the sound of running feet. They reached the horses. Nathan had already prepared 2 of them, his own mount, and one he had quietly stolen from the corral earlier. He lifted Martha onto the horse like she weighed nothing, then swung up onto his own. "Hold on tight," he told her, and then they were galloping into the darkness. The first shots rang out behind them, but Nathan had chosen his route carefully. They plunged into a narrow canyon where pursuit would be difficult. The horses' hooves struck sparks from the rocky ground as they ran. Martha clung to her horse's mane, trusting the animal to navigate the treacherous path. They rode hard for hours, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the village. When dawn finally began to lighten the eastern sky, Nathan led them off the main trail and up a steep slope to a hidden shelf of rock sheltered by an overhang. "We will rest here," he said, dismounting and then helping Martha down. Her legs gave out the moment her feet touched the ground, and Nathan caught her before she fell. He lowered her gently against the rock wall, then went to tend the horses. Martha watched him work, still trying to process what had happened. This stranger had come for her. He had tracked her for 11 days through hostile territory and then walked into an enemy village to pull her out. It seemed impossible, like something from a story rather than real life. When he finished with the horses, he came and sat near her, pulling supplies from his pack. He had food, jerky, and some kind of hard bread. He offered it to her, and she took it with shaking hands. "Thank you," she managed to say. Her voice came out rough and raw. "You saved my life." He looked at her then, really looked at her for the first time. His gray eyes were intense, but not unkind. "You are Martha Sullivan." It was not a question, but she nodded anyway. "And you are?" "Nathan Ashford." "You came from Julesburg?" "I did." "My father?" She had to ask, even though she already knew the answer from the way his expression shifted. "I am sorry. He did not survive the attack." Martha closed her eyes, feeling tears burn behind her lids. She had known, of course, but hearing it confirmed still hit like a physical blow. Her father was gone. She was alone. "We should rest while we can," Nathan said quietly. "They will follow us, and we have a long way to go before we are safe." Martha nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She lay down on the hard rock, and despite everything, exhaustion pulled her under within minutes. Nathan kept watch, his rifle across his knees. He studied the woman sleeping nearby, taking in the bruises on her face, the raw wounds on her wrists, the way even in sleep she seemed tense and ready to flee. 11 days she had survived as a captive. That took strength most people did not possess. He found himself hoping she would be all right, that the things she had endured would not break something vital inside her. Then he pushed those thoughts aside. Right now, his job was to get her home alive. Everything else could wait. The sun climbed higher, and Nathan allowed himself a few hours of rest, his back against the rock wall, his hand never far from his weapons. When afternoon came, he woke Martha gently. "We need to move," he said. She sat up, wincing at her stiff muscles. Nathan offered her water and more food, which she accepted gratefully. Then they were on the horses again, riding south toward safety. That night they made a cold camp in a dense grove of pines. Nathan gave Martha his blanket when he saw her shivering, despite her protests. He sat with his back to a tree, watching the darkness, listening for any sound of pursuit. "Why did you come after me?" Martha asked suddenly. She was sitting nearby, wrapped in the blanket, her eyes reflecting the starlight. Nathan considered the question. "Someone had to. But why you? Did you know my father?" "No, I had never met either of you before." "Then I do not understand. You risked your life for a stranger." He looked at her, seeing the genuine confusion in her expression. "Would you have done differently? If you had the skills to track someone, to survive out here, and you knew someone needed help, would you have turned away?" Martha thought about it, then slowly shook her head. "No, I suppose I would not have." "There is your answer, then." They sat in silence for a while. Then Martha spoke again, her voice softer. "I tried to keep track of the days, but I lost count. How long were you tracking me?" 11 days from Julesburg to the village. 13 now." 13 days. She shook her head in wonder. "I did not think anyone would come. I thought I was going to die out here." "You did not die. You survived. Because of you." Nathan did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. After a while, Martha lay down and eventually fell asleep again. Nathan kept his vigil, his eyes scanning the darkness, his mind alert for danger. On the 13th day, they crossed a high pass and began descending the eastern slopes of the mountains. The terrain was rough, forcing them to lead the horses on foot through sections where the trail became too treacherous to ride. Nathan went first, testing each step, then guiding Martha through the difficult spots. Several times she slipped on loose rock, and each time his hand shot out to steady her. His strength was reassuring, solid and dependable. Martha found herself watching him as they traveled, noticing things, the way he moved with quiet confidence through the wilderness, how his eyes were constantly scanning their surroundings, reading signs she could not see, the gentle way he handled the horses, despite his great size and obvious strength. That evening they finally risked a small fire. They were far enough from the village now that Nathan judged it safe. He shot a rabbit and roasted it over the flames. The smell of cooking meat made Martha's stomach growl audibly, and Nathan almost smiled at the sound. "When did you last have a proper meal?" he asked. "Before the attack. My father and I had breakfast before we left town that morning." She paused, doing the math. 14 days ago. "You've been very strong." The simple statement, delivered matter-of-factly, made something warm bloom in Martha's chest. "I did not feel strong. I felt terrified. Strength is not the absence of fear. It is continuing on despite it." They ate in companionable silence. The fire crackled softly, and somewhere in the distance an owl called. For the first time since the attack, Martha felt something like peace settle over her. "Where will you go?" Nathan asked. "After we reach Julesburg?" The question caught Martha off guard. She had not thought that far ahead. "I do not know. My father and we had a small homestead outside of town, but I cannot work it alone. No other family. My mother died when I was 12. No siblings. My father was all I had." Nathan nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "That is hard." "What about you?" Martha asked. "Do you have family?" "Not anymore. My parents passed years ago. I had a brother, but he died in the war." "I'm sorry." He shrugged. "It was a long time ago. I have been alone since." "By choice?" He looked at her then, something flickering in his eyes. "I suppose so. The mountains are not a place for most people. It takes a certain temperament to thrive in this kind of solitude." "Do you thrive in it?" Martha asked, genuinely curious. Nathan was quiet for a moment. "I survive it. Whether I thrive, I'm not certain anymore." The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. Martha sensed he was not a man who shared such thoughts easily. She felt honored that he would open up to her, even a little. "Well," she said softly, "I am very grateful you were there, that you knew how to survive out here. I would not have made it without you. You are stronger than you think, Martha Sullivan." The way he said her name, gentle and respectful, made her heart do a strange little flutter. She told herself it was just gratitude, just the natural response to someone who had saved her life. But sitting there in the firelight, watching the way the flames cast shadows across his strong features, she suspected it might be something more. On the 14th day, they spotted signs of other travelers, a trail that showed recent use, horse droppings that were only a day or two old. They were getting close to civilization again. Nathan's demeanor changed subtly. He became more alert, more cautious. Out in the deep wilderness, he had seemed completely at ease. But as they drew nearer to areas where they might encounter other people, tension crept into his shoulders. "Is something wrong?" Martha asked. "We need to be careful. Not everyone we might meet out here would have good intentions, especially when they see a woman traveling." Martha felt a chill run through her. She had been so focused on escaping the raiders that she had not considered what other dangers might await them. But Nathan was right. 2 people alone, one of them a woman, would be vulnerable to attack. As if sensing her fear, Nathan reached over and briefly touched her hand. "I will keep you safe. I promise you that." And Martha believed him. This man had tracked her for 11 days through mountains that would have killed most people, had walked into a hostile village alone to rescue her, had kept her alive for 3 more days while being pursued. If Nathan Ashford said he would protect her, then she was protected. They made good progress that day, covering more ground than they had since leaving the village. The terrain was easier now, rolling hills rather than jagged peaks. The air was thicker, warmer. Martha could smell pine and wildflowers, scents that reminded her of home. That night they camped beside a stream. Nathan caught fish with his bare hands, moving with a speed and precision that amazed Martha. They cooked the fish over the fire and ate until they were full. "Can I ask you something?" Martha said as they sat watching the stars emerge. "Of course. Why do you live alone in the mountains? It seems like a lonely life." Nathan was quiet for a long time. "After my brother died, I came west. I could not stay in the places we had been together. Too many memories. I started trapping, hunting, spending more and more time in the wilderness. Eventually, I realized I preferred it to town life. The mountains do not ask questions. They do not judge. They are what they are, honest and straightforward." "But do you not miss having someone to talk to share things with?" He glanced at her, and even in the dim light she could see something in his expression. "I did not think I did, but these past few days I find myself reconsidering that assumption." Martha's breath caught. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? Before she could respond, Nathan stood abruptly. "You should get some rest. We have another long day tomorrow." Martha wanted to push the conversation further, but she could see he had closed himself off again. So she lay down on her blanket and listened to the stream bubbling over rocks, trying to make sense of the feelings swirling inside her. She had known Nathan for only 3 days, though it felt longer. He had been nothing but respectful and protective. He had shared his food, his blanket, his knowledge of survival. He had kept her safe when she had been at her most vulnerable. And somewhere in those 3 days, Martha realized she had started to fall for him. It was crazy. It was too fast. She had just lost her father, had just survived a terrible ordeal. Her emotions were all over the place. But despite all the logical reasons this did not make sense, her heart kept insisting it was true. She was falling in love with Nathan Ashford. On the morning of the 15th day, they crossed a ridge and saw the plains spread out below them. In the distance, barely visible through the haze, was Julesburg. "We will be back by nightfall," Nathan said. Martha should have felt relief, joy, excitement, and part of her did, but another part felt something like sorrow. Because once they reached town, this journey would be over. Nathan would go back to his solitary life in the mountains, and she would have to figure out how to rebuild her life without her father. And she might never see Nathan again. They descended from the mountains, the horses picking their way down the rocky slopes. The day grew warmer as they lost elevation. By afternoon, they were on flat ground, riding across grassland dotted with wildflowers. Nathan had grown quiet, his expression distant. Martha wondered if he was thinking the same things she was, or maybe he was just eager to complete his task and return to his preferred solitude. "Nathan," she said as they rode. He looked over at her. "Yes? What will you do after we reach town?" "Resupply, then head back into the mountains." "Alone? That is how I prefer it." "Is it really?" The words came out before she could stop them. "Or is it just what you have gotten used to?" Nathan reined in his horse and Martha stopped beside him. His gray eyes searched her face. "Why do you ask?" Martha took a breath, gathering her courage. "Because these past few days, I have seen something different in you. When you talk to me, when we sit by the fire at night, you do not seem like a man who wants to be alone. You seem like a man who has been alone too long and has forgotten there is another way to live." "Martha, I know it is forward of me to say this. I know we barely know each other. But Nathan, you saved my life. You are the bravest, strongest, kindest man I have ever met. And the thought of never seeing you again after today makes my heart hurt in a way I cannot explain." Nathan stared at her, and Martha saw a war playing out behind his eyes. Finally, he dismounted and came to stand beside her horse. He reached up and helped her down, his hands lingering on her waist even after her feet touched the ground. "You have been through a terrible ordeal," he said quietly. "Your feelings right now, they might not be what you think they are. Gratitude can feel like something more, especially after trauma. Do you really believe that is all this is? Gratitude? I do not know what to believe. I know that you deserve better than a mountain man who has spent the last 5 years running from his own ghosts. Should you not let me decide what I deserve?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "In a few days, when you have had time to heal and recover, you may feel differently. You may look back on this and realize you were caught up in the moment. And what if I do not? What if a few days from now, or a few weeks or a few months, I still feel the same way? Then I suppose I would be the biggest fool in Colorado for walking away from you. Martha reached up and placed her hand against his cheek. He flinched slightly at the contact, as if he had forgotten what a gentle touch felt like. "You do not have to walk away," she whispered. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. He leaned in slightly, his eyes dropping to her lips. But then he stepped back, putting distance between them. "We should keep moving," he said, his voice rough. "The sun will set soon." Disappointed but not defeated, Martha let him help her back onto her horse. They rode the last few miles in silence, the lights of Julesburg growing brighter as dusk fell. The town was small, just a collection of wooden buildings along the railroad line. But to Martha, who had thought she would never see civilization again, it looked beautiful. People stopped and stared as they rode down the main street. Word traveled fast in small towns, and within minutes a crowd had gathered. "Martha Sullivan! Lord have mercy, you are alive! How did you escape? Who is this man?" Nathan helped Martha dismount in front of the doctor's office. The town doctor, an older man with kind eyes and gray whiskers, pushed through the crowd. "Miss Sullivan, we feared the worst. Come inside, let me examine you." Martha allowed herself to be led toward the door, but she turned back to look at Nathan. He was already remounting his horse, preparing to leave. "Wait," she called out. "Nathan, wait!" But he did not wait. He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture of farewell, then turned his horse and rode away into the gathering darkness. Martha watched him go, her heart sinking. The next few days passed in a blur. The doctor confirmed that while Martha was battered and bruised, she had no serious injuries. She would heal, given time and rest. The townspeople were kind, offering her food, clothes, a place to stay. Everyone wanted to hear her story, and Martha told it so many times she felt like she was reciting lines from a play. But she always left out the most important part. She did not tell them about the feelings that had developed between her and Nathan, or about their conversation on that last day. Those moments were private, precious, hers alone to treasure. A week after their return, Martha attended her father's funeral. He had been buried the day after the attack, but the town held a memorial service now that she was back. Standing at his grave, Martha felt the full weight of her loss crash down on her. She had been holding it together, staying strong, but now the tears came and would not stop. She cried for her father, for the future they would not have together. She cried for the homestead they had been building, the dreams that had died with him. And she cried for Nathan, who had walked away, because he thought it was the right thing to do. After the service, the town lawyer approached her about her father's estate. The homestead was hers now, along with a small amount of money her father had saved. It was not much, but it was something. "I am afraid you will need to decide what to do with the property," the lawyer said gently. "It is too much for one person to manage alone." "I know," Martha said, and she did know, but knowing and accepting were two different things. That night, unable to sleep, Martha sat by the window of the boarding house room she was staying in and looked out at the mountains. Somewhere up there, Nathan was probably sitting by a fire, alone with his thoughts. Did he think of her? Did he regret walking away? She had meant what she said to him. Time had not changed her feelings. If anything, the days apart had only made them stronger. She missed him, missed his quiet strength, the way he made her feel safe, the rare moments when he would almost smile at something she said. The next morning, Martha made a decision. She was not going to just accept this. Nathan thought she needed time to be sure of her feelings, so she would give it time. 3 months. If after 3 months she still felt the same way, she would go find him and tell him so. And if he still walked away after that, well, at least she would know she tried. Summer turned into early autumn. Martha sold the homestead and used the money to rent a small house in town. She took a job helping the doctor, using the skills she had learned caring for sick neighbors back when her mother was alive. The work was hard but fulfilling, and it helped keep her mind occupied. But no matter how busy she kept herself, her thoughts always returned to Nathan. Every tall, broad-shouldered man she saw made her heart leap, hoping it might be him. Every time a stranger rode into town, she wondered if it would be Nathan coming back for her. But he never came. 2 months passed, then 3. The leaves turned gold and red, and the first cold winds began blowing down from the mountains. Martha's bruises had long since faded, and the raw places on her wrists had healed to faint scars. On the outside, she looked like she had fully recovered from her ordeal. On the inside, she ached with missing Nathan. On the day that marked exactly 3 months since their return to Julesburg, Martha woke with a sense of purpose. She had given it time, just as Nathan had wanted. Her feelings had not changed. If anything, they had only grown stronger with absence. She spent the morning making preparations. She bought supplies, borrowed a horse, packed everything she would need for a journey into the mountains. The doctor tried to talk her out of it. "Miss Sullivan, winter is coming. The mountains will be dangerous." "I know, but I have to do this." "At least wait for spring." Martha shook her head. "I've waited long enough." She left at dawn the next day, following the same trail she and Nathan had taken on their return journey. She had paid attention during those last few days, had tried to memorize landmarks. She was not a tracker like Nathan, but she knew the general direction. For 3 days she traveled alone, climbing back into the mountains. It was harder than she remembered, the trails steeper, the air thinner. But Martha pushed on, driven by determination and love. On the 4th day, she got lost. The trail she had been following split in 3 directions, and she could not remember which way they had come. She chose the middle path, but after several hours of traveling, she realized it was wrong. The landscape did not look familiar. Panic started to creep in as the sun began to set. She was lost in the mountains with winter approaching. Nathan had made it look so easy, navigating this vast wilderness, but for her, it was overwhelming. She made camp for the night, building a fire the way she had watched Nathan do. The flames provided warmth and light, but they could not keep the fear at bay. What if she could not find her way? What if she died out here, alone in the cold? Morning came, gray and cold. Martha forced herself to eat some of her supplies, then started walking again. She chose a direction and hoped it was right. By afternoon, it started to snow. Just light flurries at first, but soon it was coming down harder. Martha's visibility dropped to just a few dozen yards. She stumbled along trying to find shelter, growing more frightened with each passing minute. Then she heard it, a sound that made her blood run cold, the deep rumbling growl of something large and predatory. She spun around and saw it, a mountain lion, sleek and powerful, watching her from a rocky outcropping 20 feet away. Its amber eyes were fixed on her, measuring, calculating. Martha froze. She had no weapon except a small knife. Against a predator like this, she would not stand a chance. The lion began to stalk forward, its body low to the ground. Martha's mind raced. She should make herself look bigger, make noise, something, anything. But terror had locked her muscles in place. The gunshot rang out like thunder. The lion jerked and fell, dead before it hit the ground. Martha spun toward the sound and saw a figure emerging from the swirling snow. Nathan. He walked toward her, his rifle still raised, his eyes scanning for any other threats. When he reached her, he finally lowered the weapon and looked at her with an expression that mixed relief, anger, and something else she could not quite name. "What in the name of heaven are you doing out here?" His voice was rough, harsh even. "Looking for you," Martha said. Her voice shook, whether from cold or fear or emotion, she was not sure. "You could have died. You almost did die. Do you have any idea how dangerous it is to be out here alone?" "I know, but I had to find you." "Why?" The word came out almost like a shout. "Why would you risk your life like this?" "Because I love you," Martha shouted back. "Because 3 months have passed and I still love you, and I needed you to know that this is not gratitude or trauma or anything else except the simple truth that I am in love with you, Nathan Ashford, and I could not spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been if I had not at least tried to tell you." The snow fell around them, and for a long moment Nathan just stared at her. Then he closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce and desperate, full of 3 months of loneliness and longing. Martha kissed him back with equal intensity, her hands fisting in his coat, holding him close like she was afraid he might disappear. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "You foolish, brave, impossible woman," he murmured. "I have been miserable every day since I left you. I told myself I was doing the right thing, giving you space to heal. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared that what I felt for you was too much, too fast. Scared that I would not be enough for you." "You are enough," Martha said fiercely. "You are everything." He kissed her again, softer this time. "I love you too," he whispered against her lips. "God help me. I love you so much." They stood there in the snow, holding each other, and Martha felt like she had finally come home. Nathan led her to his cabin, which was only half a mile away. Martha could not believe she had gotten so close without realizing it. The cabin was small but solidly built, with a stone fireplace and thick walls that kept out the cold. Inside, it was warm and surprisingly comfortable. "You have been following me," Martha said as Nathan built up the fire. He looked over at her, a hint of color in his cheeks. "For the past 3 days. I spotted you on the trail and could not believe what I was seeing. I thought maybe I had finally lost my mind and was seeing things I wanted to see rather than what was really there. Why did you not come to me right away?" I was trying to figure out what to say, how to explain that I had been on my way back to Julesburg to find you when I saw you heading into the mountains. Martha's heart skipped. "You were coming back for me?" Nathan nodded. "I could not stay away anymore. I tried. I spent 3 months trying to convince myself that walking away was the right thing to do, but every day without you was worse than the one before. I finally admitted that I would rather have whatever time with you I could get than spend the rest of my life alone, wondering what if." "We are both fools then," Martha said with a smile. "Me coming to find you, you coming to find me." "Fools in love," Nathan agreed. He came and sat beside her, taking her cold hands in his large, warm ones. "Martha, I do not have much to offer you. This cabin, my skills, my strength, it is not the life you are used to. I do not want the life I am used to. I want a life with you. Here in the mountains, in town, wherever. As long as we are together." Nathan cupped her face in his hands, his gray eyes intense. "Are you certain? Because if I let myself have you, if I let myself love you completely, I will never be able to let you go." "I'm counting on it," Martha whispered. He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Martha felt like every difficult moment of the past 3 months had been worth it to arrive at this perfect instant. They talked through the night, sitting by the fire, learning everything about each other. Nathan told her about his childhood in Ohio, about his brother who had died at Gettysburg, about the years of drifting that had led him west. Martha told him about growing up in Kansas, about her mother's death, about the dreams she and her father had for their homestead. "I'm sorry you lost him," Nathan said quietly. "He sounded like a good man." "He was. I think he would have liked you." "What makes you say that?" "Because you kept his daughter alive. You brought me back to him even if he was not there anymore to thank you for it. That would have meant everything to him." As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Nathan pulled Martha close. "Stay with me," he said, "not just for today, but forever. Marry me, Martha. Let me spend the rest of my life making you happy." "Yes," Martha said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married a week later in Julesburg, with half the town in attendance. Martha wore a simple dress of deep blue, and Nathan had gotten a haircut and shaved, though Martha secretly missed the wilder look he usually sported. The ceremony was short and sweet. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her thoroughly, making several of the older ladies fan themselves. Martha laughed against his lips, deliriously happy. They spent the winter in Nathan's cabin, and Martha discovered she loved mountain life. Nathan taught her how to read tracks, how to set snares, how to predict weather by watching the sky. Martha taught him that a home was more than just a shelter, showing him how small touches could make the cabin more comfortable and welcoming. They talked for hours each day, learning each other's rhythms and quirks. Nathan discovered that Martha sang while she worked, her voice sweet and clear. Martha learned that Nathan could carve beautiful things from wood, his large hands surprisingly delicate when working on small details. But more than anything, they loved each other. Nathan was gentle and patient, always making sure Martha felt safe and cherished. And Martha brought warmth and light into Nathan's life, chasing away the shadows that had haunted him for so long. When spring arrived, they made a decision. They would keep the cabin as a retreat, but build a home closer to Julesburg. Nathan could still trap and hunt, but they would also have access to town when they needed it. It was a compromise that suited them both. They found land a few miles outside of town, near a creek with good water and fertile soil. Nathan built them a house with his own hands, solid and strong like everything he did. Martha planted a garden and set up a small clinic, using her medical knowledge to help neighbors who were too far from town to easily reach the doctor. A year after their wedding, Martha discovered she was pregnant. Nathan was simultaneously overjoyed and terrified. The thought of being a father filled him with a wonder he had never experienced before, but also a fear that he might fail at this most important task. "You will be a wonderful father," Martha assured him, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "You are the most protective, caring man I know. Our child will be so lucky to have you." Their son was born in the spring, a healthy baby boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's smile. They named him Thomas after Martha's father. Nathan held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, and Martha knew in that moment that her heart had never been fuller. 2 years later, they had a daughter. She had Martha's blonde hair and Nathan's stubborn streak. They named her Sarah after Nathan's mother. With 2 young children, the house was never quiet, never still. And Nathan, who had spent so many years in solitude, found that he loved the chaos and noise of family life. "Who would have thought?" he said one evening, watching their children play while Martha sat beside him on the porch. "A few years ago I was alone in a mountain cabin, convinced that was all I deserved. Now I have this, all of this." Martha leaned her head on his shoulder. "We both found more than we thought we would. I was just a girl making a supply run with her father. I had no idea that terrible day would lead to this. Do you ever wish things had been different, that you did not have to go through what you did?" Martha considered the question seriously. "I wish my father had lived. I will always wish that. But the rest of it, as horrible as it was, brought me to you. And I cannot wish that away." Nathan kissed the top of her head. "I tracked you for 14 days. I know. I would track you for 1400 if I had to the ends of the earth and back." "Good thing I'm right here then," Martha said with a smile. "Good thing," Nathan agreed. The years passed peacefully. Their children grew strong and healthy, learning from both parents. Thomas inherited his father's skill with tracking and hunting, while Sarah showed her mother's talent for healing. They added 2 more children to their family, another boy and then another girl, and their home was always filled with love and laughter. Nathan never lost his love for the mountains, and several times a year he would take trips into the wilderness to trap and hunt. But he always came back to Martha, to their home, to their life together. The solitary mountain man was gone, replaced by a devoted husband and father who had discovered that what he had been searching for all those years in the wilderness was not isolation, but connection. Martha continued her work helping the sick and injured, earning a reputation throughout the territory for her skill and compassion. But her greatest joy was her family, the life she and Nathan had built together from the ashes of tragedy. Sometimes, when the children were asleep and they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Martha would think back to those 14 days. The terror of being taken, the suffering of captivity, the miracle of Nathan appearing like an answer to prayers she had been too frightened to voice. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan would ask, because he could always tell when her mind had wandered to the past. "How lucky I am," Martha would say. "How blessed." And Nathan would pull her close, his strong arms around her, and they would sit in comfortable silence as darkness fell and the stars came out, 2 souls who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would last a lifetime. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Martha back to the spot where he had first rescued her from the mountain lion. The cabin was still there, maintained but empty most of the year now. They stayed there for 3 days, just the 2 of them, while their oldest children watched the younger ones. "Do you remember?" Nathan asked as they stood in the clearing where he had shot the lion. "You were so scared, but trying so hard to be brave." "I remember you appearing out of the snow like something from a dream. I remember thinking I must be hallucinating, that surely no one could have followed me all that way. I would have followed you anywhere. And you did. You tracked me through mountains and hostile territory. You risked your life for mine before you even knew me." Nathan turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I knew enough. I knew you were worth saving. And I have never regretted that choice, not for a single moment." "Neither have I," Martha whispered, rising on her toes to kiss him. They made love that night in the cabin where their journey together had truly begun, and it felt like a completion of a circle. From strangers to lovers to husband and wife to parents, they had traveled so far together, and they still had so much further to go. Years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growing of their children. Thomas married at 22, bringing home a wife who quickly became like another daughter to Martha and Nathan. Sarah showed no interest in marrying, preferring to focus on her medical studies under the town doctor who had taken her on as his apprentice. Their younger children grew as well, each finding their own path. And through it all, Nathan and Martha remained each other's constant, their love only deepening with time. When they were both in their 50s, sitting on the porch of the home Nathan had built with his own hands all those years ago, surrounded by grandchildren and children and the life they had created together, Martha took Nathan's hand. "I was thinking today about that moment on the trail, when you told me you would resupply and go back to the mountains alone, and I asked if that was really what you wanted." Nathan smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "I remember. I was trying so hard to do the noble thing, to let you go. I am glad you failed at being noble. So am I. Every single day, I am grateful that you were brave enough to come find me, to tell me how you felt. I do not think I would have had the courage without you forcing my hand." "We saved each other," Martha said simply. "You saved my life, and I saved your heart." "You did," Nathan agreed, pulling her close. "You absolutely did." They watched the sun set over the mountains, those same peaks where Nathan had tracked Martha for 14 days, where he had found her alive against all odds, where their love story had begun. The sky blazed with color, orange and pink and gold, beautiful and perfect. 14 days, Martha murmured. "The best 14 days of my life," Nathan said, "because they led me to you." And there, surrounded by the evidence of the beautiful life they had built together, with the mountains standing eternal in the distance and their family gathered close, Martha and Nathan knew that some journeys were worth every difficult step. Some loves were worth tracking through hostile territory, worth risking everything, worth fighting for with every ounce of strength you possessed. They had found each other in the wilderness, two lost souls brought together by tragedy and fate. And from that desperate, dangerous beginning, they had built something extraordinary. A love that had weathered every storm, overcome every obstacle, and emerged stronger for it. As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars began to appear, Nathan kissed his wife softly, tenderly, with all the love of a man who had spent 14 days tracking her through the mountains, and every day since thanking God that he had found her alive. And Martha kissed him back, pouring into that kiss all the gratitude and love and joy she felt for this man who had saved her, loved her, built a life with her. This man who had been willing to risk everything for a stranger and had gained everything in return. Their story had begun with violence and fear, but it had transformed into something beautiful. From the ashes of tragedy had risen a love that would endure, that would be told to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren as a testament to courage, faith, and the power of two hearts finding each other against impossible odds. 14 days of tracking through hostile territory, 50-plus years of loving each other completely. And if they were blessed with more years to come, Nathan and Martha would spend every one of them grateful for that terrible, wonderful day when Martha vanished into the mountains, and Nathan Ashford decided he would not rest until he found her alive. In the end, that was the greatest adventure of all. Not the tracking, not the rescue, but the life they built together afterward, the children they raised, the land they tended, the love they shared. Every day was a gift, every moment precious, because they both knew how easily it all could have been lost. As darkness settled over their home and the sounds of family filled the air around them, Nathan and Martha sat close together, hands intertwined, hearts beating in perfect rhythm. Two souls who had found each other in the wilderness and chosen every single day to continue finding each other again and again. Their love story was not the shortest or the simplest, but it was theirs, hard-won and deeply cherished, a testament to the truth that sometimes the greatest loves begin in the most unlikely ways. All it takes is courage, determination, and the willingness to track through hostile territory for as long as it takes to find the one your heart cannot live without. And Nathan Ashford had proven beyond any doubt that for Martha Sullivan, he would track through any territory, face any danger, overcome any obstacle. Because she was worth it. They were worth it. And their love, born in the wild mountains of Colorado in 1868, would endure long after they were both gone, a story passed down through generations of the family they had created together. A story of a woman who vanished into hostile territory, a mountain man who tracked her for 14 days, and the extraordinary love they built from that desperate beginning. A love that lasted a lifetime and beyond, eternal as the mountains themselves.